It's a big decision, Pete, because right now with this global pandemic, we do need an international organisation like the WHO to do very important work. But there are legitimate criticisms of their performance. Even I was a bit flabbergasted by their recent advice around wet markets being able to stay open in China because of the importance of livelihoods of that demographic that rely on it. That may be so, but of course, many of these pandemics, these viruses have emerged from these wet markets, particularly around the wild animal sales at these wet markets, and of course, COVID-19 is most likely to emerge from a wet market in Wuhan. So there's real concern around the advice of the WHO and some of its performance. I guess it's going to be a big decision for Scott Morrison as well as to whether the federal government continues to support the WHO and its work. It still does a lot of good work, I should say, globally with respect to this pandemic, but there are legitimate criticisms around its performance.
Yeah, I mean, even there's calls now for Taiwan to be included because they've claimed that the WHO is basically just parroting China's propaganda. But, I mean, there was an important clarification here. Someone noted on Twitter this morning that a wet market is actually any type of market that's right around the world. It's basically the ice that is melted on the floor. But the difference here is the live and the exotic animals that might be carrying all kinds of problems, right?
You're right, Pete. So this is where the problem has been with the emergence of avian influenza, SARS, and now COVID-19. It's around the exotic animals, the wild animals, where zoologically, I guess I'm not an expert in this, but they don't usually sit on top of each other in the wild, and there's a transference of viruses from one animal to another and then on to humans. And that the lack of health and safety regulations around that aspect of the wet markets is the real cause for concern. And I would hope China takes responsibility for this and puts in very strict measures around those aspects of the wet markets. You don't close down the whole market where you're selling fruit and vegetables and all, and even just beef and chicken and poultry and stuff. But we're talking about those areas where there's the highest risk, where viruses like this have emerged in the past. Shut that down. Make sure that that is dealt with, because China has a responsibility to the world, and I would hope that they act in a positive way going forward to help, obviously, with the global economic recovery, but to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yep. Peter, just before we go, we've got about a minute left. Just schools. It's going to be the hot button issue of the next couple of days here locally anyway. Scott Morrison says that basically kids should be going back. States at the moment are kind of not going so fast. What do you think needs to happen here?
Well, I think, like most parents, all parents are stressed around the country. And it doesn't really help to have these mixed messages between the state governments and the federal government. I want them to clean this up. The National Cabinet has worked very effectively during this crisis, and it's a real credit to the federal government, various state governments of all political persuasions. They've worked really, really well together. There's been a few differences, obviously, but this one's a bit of a marker here because it is conflicting advice. We're getting different advice from state and federal governments on whether schools should reopen or when they reopen and so on. I just want them to clean this mess up, and I think that they owe it to parents to provide consistent and clear advice from all levels of government.